Priti Patel resigns as International Development Secretary as more embarrassing details emerged of her off-the-books meetings with Israeli politicians. She spent half an hour with the Prime Minister in Downing Street, arriving and leaving by the back door to try and avoid journalists. It was suspected that she would be sacked after it emerged she had failed to disclose 2 other meetings with senior Israelis. In her letter of resignation, Ms. Patel admitted her actions fell below the high standards that are expected of a Secretary of State. She went on to offer a fulsome apology, saying, "While my actions were meant with the best of intentions, my actions also fell below the standards of transparency and openness that I have promoted and advocated." In her reply, Theresa May said she was glad to accept her original apology over the trip. But she added, "Now that further details have come to light, it is right that you have decided to resign and adhere to the high standards of transparency and openness that you have advocated." She met the Israeli Public Security Minister in Parliament in September and a senior official from the Israeli Foreign Ministry in New York a week later. It also emerged she visited an Israeli field hospital in the Golan Heights on her holiday. The UK does not recognize the Israeli-occupied area. The Foreign Office and Downing Street were unaware the meetings had taken place and diplomatic officials were not present. It follows days of questions over her having apparently gone rogue during a family holiday in Israel in August. Ms. Patel admitted to discussing humanitarian aid during the meetings, which were set up by Lord Pollock, a corporate lobbyist and the driving force behind the Conservative Friends of Israel. On her return, she pressed British officials to investigate ways to provide support to the Israeli army's humanitarian operations in the occupied Golan Heights. But officials are understood to have shot down the idea because Britain does not officially recognize the Israeli government's claim to the Golan Heights region. Ms. Patel only met with Israeli officials on the trip and not their Palestinian counterparts, which it's feared could give the impression that the UK government's position had changed on the issue. It is the latest blow for a Prime Minister who was forced to sack her Defence Secretary, Sir Michael Fallon, last week over sexual misconduct allegations, forcing a mini reshuffle. Meanwhile, her deputy, First Secretary of State Damian Green, is being investigated over claims he behaved inappropriately with a female Tory activist and kept extreme porn on a computer in his office. A 4th minister in Mrs May's top team, Mark Garnier, remains under investigation by the Cabinet Office, over claims he called his researcher Sugar TS and asked her to buy sex toys. In an extraordinary series of events, Ms. Patel was ordered to return from a ministerial visit to Africa just hours after she got off the plane in Nairobi. Ms. Patel was forced to apologize after holding 12 meetings with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and other top officials during the trip, without telling Downing Street, the Foreign Office or British diplomats in the region. On her return, she pressed British officials to investigate ways to provide support to the Israeli army's humanitarian operations in the occupied Golan Heights. Until late Tuesday afternoon, Number 10 had insisted Mrs May still had full confidence in Ms. Patel, had accepted her apology and considered the matter closed. But it emerged last night Theresa May only learned Ms. Patel may have discussed giving money to the Israeli army with officials when it was reported in the media yesterday morning. Labour's Lord Falconer accused Ms. Patel of colluding with the Israeli government. Losing the prominent Leave supporter will give Theresa May a headache when it comes to reshuffling her carefully balanced cabinet. In response to Ms. Patel's resignation, Kate Hossamer MP, Labour's shadow International Development Secretary, said, "Priti Patel appears to have breached the ministerial code, gone behind the government's back, and misled the British public." After initially denying the allegations, then repeatedly changing her story and failing to disclose all of her meetings, it is right that she has now resigned. But we still need to know what was discussed in these meetings and what Number 10 and the Foreign Office knew and when. Theresa May must get control of her chaotic cabinet and decaying government or step aside for Labour to govern for the many, not the few.